Hello and welcome to Eye on Issues, coming to you live on Spectrum Television. And of course, we are always here to bring you up to speed with the latest development and issues bordering on the growth and development of Nigeria as a society. My name is Frank Cizadet and I'm delighted to be your anchor for today. And as usual, we will be touchlighting on a very important issue, particularly as we gear up to the 2023 general elections. Yes, we know there are lots of issues bedeviling Nigeria, and one of such is the educational sector. There have been a lot of growing concerns, particularly as concerns the primary and secondary school education. And one of those key issues has been the fact that as far as Nigeria is concerned, as at this moment, by the last update given by UNICEF in 2020, we had a total of 10.5 million out-of-school children, and of course in 2022 that number further increased to over 20 million. And as we speak also, it is very important to note that over 70% of Nigerian students or children under the age of 10 cannot perform common everyday calculations, or what you call mathematics or arithmetic calculations, let alone understand the rudiments that comes with learning. These, amongst other issues, are what we will be looking at under the subtopic Nigeria's educational system, limitations, aspirations, and solutions. Joining me live on set is a very amazing gentleman. His name is Idiongo Ebong. He's a counselor and a teacher. Welcome to Eye on Issues.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's go straight to understanding. As a teacher, you work with students within the secondary sector, and we'd just like to know, what is the primary and secondary educational system in Nigeria like presently?
Okay, I wouldn't have the, if I were to score, that's good to give like a percentage to level of performance. Judging by what we see physically, I can only place us at 20%. As far as learning is concerned, as far as administration, as far as government political will is concerned, as far as result is concerned, I can only place us at 20%. 20%. 20%.
That means a lot more work needs to be done for Nigeria to move from the meager 20%, judging by your statement, to, let's say, 70% that could be said to be a pass mark.
Yes, yes. And then the percentage comes from we have a policy on education. We have objectives that we are supposed to achieve as a country. And my 20% comes from the fact that those objectives have not been achieved.
Okay, let's talk about the objectives as far as Nigeria and Nigerian educational system is concerned.
Okay, to summarize the whole lengthy thing of the objective of Nigerian education, it's supposed to produce, number one, graduates with undoubtable degree of employability, enterprising young Nigerians, that's what they're supposed to produce, and then the present introduction of trade subjects into secondary schools. Okay, so we are supposed to have graduates we can invest on, those that we can employ to make our system grow, make our economy grow. That's the summary of the lengthy rate of the Nigerian educational objectives. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the objectives, and at this point in time, looking at where we are, would you say those objectives have been implemented, or there have been enough steps taken to ensure that those objectives are visible?
Well, I would answer that question by analyzing the present political character as it concerns education. Judging by what we see, I find it difficult to believe that Nigerian government or political will is anything to go by as far as education is concerned. That's number one. When we talk of the policies, the statements, the lectures, the writings, they are there. But what protocol has the government implemented to ensure that these things are achieved? I can't really point hand to them. When you have a country that we can record 9 months to 10 months of strike, like you've just mentioned at your intro, 10 million out of school children. And then we look around to our classrooms and dilapidated structures and teachers that are not well equipped to handle problems of the 21st century child. and the level of practical as results our own curriculum, and the review of these curriculums, or curricula, sorry, we can't say that much has been done. No, we can't say.
You can't say that much has been done. Okay, you've mentioned a lot of things which we're going to touch one after the other from the infrastructure, but let's start from the very basics. Now, we understand that the children, the academic environment is guided by the curriculum. Now, this curriculum sets in standard what the child learns at what point in time. I had a conversation just recently with a parent who has two sets of children, one in the public school at just S3, and then the other in the nursery school, I think leveled green as they call it. That's probably nursery 3,
okay,
or nursery 2 or thereabout. Now, her experience was the homework given to the child in nursery school, private, is the exact same thing that is given to the child who is in secondary school, JSS 3. These are two different children from two different age groups, two different environments, one in public school, one in the private school. Now, looking at this scenario, do we have a uniform curriculum that is operated upon in Nigeria as we speak?
Okay, theoretically, we have a uniform curriculum that is operated on in Nigeria. The one that is supposed to be for the basic education, yes, we have. That is supposed to be 9 years of learning. That's nursery 1, nursery 2, transition 1 to 6, JS1 to JS3, when you are awarded the
junior
certificate, basic certificate education certificate. That is there. Then you come up to SS1 to 3, and then the 4 years of university learning. There is a standard curriculum that cuts across the entire spectrum. Now, but the problem, like you mentioned, the problem that parent might experience is not so much that we do not have a curriculum, as that the curriculum that we do not have a body that supervises and ensures that we have a religious fellowship to our curriculum. We do not have such a body. If we have, they are not working. That can go, okay, this is what we have, this is the curriculum we have, you must do this. Before, we used to have inspectors going around to check notes of lesson and other things. Now, let me calm down a little. Some of our private institutions are, I'm not going to sit down here to say that the school system is about education alone. I know there is a business artery, there is professional artery. Both sustains the school system. The business, the students, the money, the structure, the facilities, that's the business part of it. Okay, the professional part of it being the teaching and the learning. Now, there are some private schools that over-elevate the cordon too much that the child becomes disadvantaged just to make the noise.
Okay, let's expatiate on that a little more. You said there are some private schools that over-elevates.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, like for instance, I've picked a notebook of a student studying English, or rather, I think they call it diction now, and they're doing vowel sequence and transcription. These are things we teach in SS1 when we are doing the vowel system, SS2. We still find them in diction in primary 1 to transcribe the word cat. Now, that child doesn't know the rudiment of the language. Basic communications is learning. Spellings is actually a challenge, and you're going to transcription. The advertisements on radio, on the circular, on flyers would be, our schools are superior, our schools are great. We do transcription even at this level. That's what I mean by elevating the cordon, the thing beyond the cordon. Now there are as a counselor, I've sit before some students administering a class assessment test to this student, and I asked, okay, what class are you applying for? He's applying for SS1. He's done writing JS3 in his private school, and then you ask him, let's look at the subjects you did in JS1, JS2. We did physics, we did chemistry, we did biology. What class? SS1. Have you done basic science? No. You now reach out to the school. Why the biology, the physics is just what just to know? We are using us is American standard, I mean the British standard, I don't know.
Okay,
now,
okay.
This child that you have deprived him of learning the basics, jumps into, just like you want to learn how to swim. You get to the Atlantic Ocean. How is it going to be possible? You start with your house, get to a swimming pool, get to your village stream, that the current is something you could manage before you throw up yourself. It's the same ideology. So this guy didn't study basic science, no physical and health education. Those are elementary rudiment that you build your step on before you could be sufficiently armed to do physics, chemistry, biology. That's what I mean by over-elevating. So what that parent may have observed would be that that school has done that. They now want to be called greats, so they make a whole lot of mistakes. Most of these school managers aren't professionals. There are businessmen who are interested in their profits. Okay? So they ignore a whole lot of professional things. They ignore them just to ensure that they make the noise, that stand out, and they are patronized by the public.
All right, let's look at the implication of such practices on the life of the children in terms of education. Is it to the detriment of the child, or does it help the child in any way?
I think that question has answered itself completely. It's a detriment of the child. Learning is a process. Learning is not automatic, it's not magical. So it's supposed to be a process. So when the child was supposed to be introduced to a number system, you are bringing quadratic equation. How are you supposed to solve that? So if we have mechanisms in place to check the curriculums of these nursery schools, and then these, of course, there is something that some of the schools stop in primary 5. They don't get to primary 6 or whatever arrangement they do. If we have a system to check that, then and ensure that those things are implemented the way they should be implemented, is something that we could say, okay, fine. It's, of course, our curriculum course gives us what is called a child-centered education. But most of our practices is more like teacher-centered or administrative-centered, just to make them comfortable in the write-off.
All right. Now, a lot of people, a lot of businessmen or parents would disagree with you at this point, because if you're saying that children who are introduced to these kinds of learning at this stage of their lives are at a disadvantage because they have not had access to the rudiments, there are parents who would be of the argument that these children are far better placed than their contemporaries who have not had a chance or access to these kinds of learning at the time their children had access to it, which is one of the drive for parents seeking out such institutions to place their children. Now, let's come from the professional point of view. These are parents who have their own genuine reasons. But looking at the realities on ground, the children you've interacted with, at the upper level, at the highest level, does it affect them?
Now, this is not a question science. There is no argument in science. It's not a question of argument as far as it is science. This isn't philosophy. You say this child is better because he was bombarded with the higher content of the curriculum at an age he wasn't supposed to. Let's put 2 of them to a test and see who does better. I've administered a whole lot of class determinant tests to them, and it's got that these ones don't do better. They don't. There is even one we handled recently of a bright student who was brought out to read. He read the paragraph that was given to him correctly and couldn't understand anything. I've seen such an example. He could speak, he could read that paragraph, but ask him the simple words that he read, he couldn't understand them. That's the product of that. When we define education as a streamatized process, there is a reason why it was done that way. You are introduced to the basic, you grow. The other day I went to buy akara on the streets. I was very hungry. And I asked the old woman to put the balls of akara on the fire, and then ignited the fire slowly. The fire burned slowly. And I was like, I'm late, I'm hungry. Increase the intensity. He says, no. That the top of the ball of akara will be done while the inside will still be raw. Because you've increased that thing beyond proportion. Unbalanced graduates, that's what we are talking about. When they are not bred according to the scheme, the way they were supposed to be bred, unbalanced graduates. So those basic things were done so that you could hold your grounds and you learn as you proceed. But if you start by introducing something that they have not been that well prepared for, the penalty is not about argument. It's scientific evidence. We do the test, we see the result, and we talk about the result.
All right, of course, as he said, we do the test, we check out the results and get to find out which of these two categories of children would fare better. If you just joined us, this is Eye on Issue coming to you live on Spectrum Television, and we are talking about Nigeria's educational system, limitations, aspirations, and solution. And of course, you already know this is one critical matter that we have to address as it concerns you and I. Now, the growing trend where parents would look out for the highest paying private schools to enroll their children has consistently been on the increase, while the government school suffers lack of infrastructural development amongst other issues. But we have to balance the scenario here, and the big question is, do children who come out of private schools perform better in reality than the children who come out of public school? We've talked about the issue of curriculum, which we're going to, of course, extensively deal on a lot more. But I'd like to hear your thought on what you feel about education and the disparity, particularly as concerns the private and the public educational system, or the private and the public sector. With the numbers on your screen, I'll be delighted to hear from you. But let's go back to the educational system. Now, within the course of that, because you've mentioned the issue of personnel. I grew up knowing that for you to be qualified to be called a teacher, you had to go through teacher grade school, or you had to undergo some kind of training, understanding how to deal with children and students before you get certified to become a teacher. Now, how is that practiced now? Because I'm asking, because I've seen scenarios where people just graduate from higher institutions, be it a polytechnic or universities, and they immediately take up a job as a teacher.
Okay, that's another problem that I don't know how it would be solved, or if the government will work up to the challenges of solving that problem. We find students who studied political science in the university, come out, graduated, and there is no employment, so they immediately become the teacher. Find those who read mass communication, and then they can't have they are not employed, and they come out to teach English. Some employed by the government. I dare to say it, some employed by the government. Now, this or that is part of the problem we have in the system, and a very, very terrible problem, very devastating problem.
How so?
We have in the system. We have people, how so? It's just like you have someone who opened YouTube, saw how they're doing operation, and wants to operate on you. Will you survive? It's simple, you will die. And he said, no, I've been watching this video over. There are some kind of professional equipment that are given to you in the medical school, intellectual equipment to equip you to function as a medical doctor. There are some intellectual equipment that are given to you in the teacher training colleges or faculties of education to be very, I think I can use myself as an example. I started teaching in 2012, immediately after my first degree in English. I graduated with 4.05 University of Rio. I was teaching then. I thought for 1 year, like a kind of a transition program, picked up an appointment and then went over to do education. When I studied education, what those things that looked so difficult for me is not about content. It's more about techniques. I told you I graduated with 4.05. I was properly armed with the content of English and literature. I could deliver, I could talk. But when we are talking of classroom practice, it's not ability to talk. It's not ability to shout. It's not you knowing the content. It's you knowing the required skill
to impart
that content on a child who, number one, may not be ready to learn. Number two, is learning in a condition that nobody should learn in that condition. Broken classrooms, very harsh weather, the noise around the environment. Three, that you are teaching a child whose economic hardship has made him think that his parent is punishing him, allowing him access to the classroom. You have very different kind of people, and you say you know. You understand what English language and literature means. You need the technique to first control that class, two, create attention, three, create focus, four, create desirability for that child to learn before you let out what you have to give to the child. Take the pens, sit down and evaluate this thing that you have given out to this child. Has he been able to assimilate? If he has not, why? Were the conditions necessary for learning properly met? If they were not, what adjustment are you making in your second class? All these things are not thought in other faculties. No, these are things that are exclusive to faculties of education. So when you find people who go into the classrooms, most especially at nursery schools, because they're everywhere. You find an accommodation, a family house today, tomorrow is turned into a nursery school, picks graduates or SS3 students by the street, and they start teaching. So they are increasing an already heated polity by doing that.
All right, now let's come back to Akwa Ibom State and using the scenario you just created. There's practically no street that you walk past, and it's not limited to Akwa Ibom State. It's also something that I've seen in other states of the Federation, that you won't see different residential houses turned into schools, that you practically would not see one private nursery or primary school springing up every other day. Let's look at government, because we know every school must come with a license from government. And that means whatever the schools are doing, there is permission and approval from the government. Would you say there is enough government interference in ensuring that the quality of education we have given out to our children from the early stage is sufficient?
Well, in that respect, when I assess the government, Nigerian government, and their footprints and their body language, I don't see them being serious at all about education. It's not about whether it is in the exclusive list or concurrent list, whatever list you want to call it. The political will towards education in Nigeria is very low, very, very low. And then there is a tendency for someone to get into the establishment and get approvals. Like you said, there are so many of such nursery schools that you know very well that the architectural ideology of the place wasn't initially designed for a school. The disaster there is different. There is a facility was designed to accommodate a family of 3, and you are pumping 100 children into that facility. Security is a problem. Comfort is a problem. Learnability is a problem. We have a whole lot of problems there. We shouldn't even go into that. The government, if they are the ones giving up, I don't believe that any school can spring up without approval. You come inspect a facility, there is no space, no playing equipment, no football field, no labs, laboratories are not there, the equipment, and you say grant approval is them. But then, come to ask, what type of moral compunction does the government have to say, no, we don't want this facility to be used as a school? When the ones that are owned by the government, there are no roofs on top. There are no chairs. When we have erosion, the entire place is flooded. Students are now swimming on the water, sitting inside that water pool to learn, and then you come to stand at a 2-story, 2-bedroom flat and say, no, you can't have classes here. It's the question is many. I don't know. It's not something that it's something that should be addressed holistically. That's just what I'm seeing in that respect. We have a few days ago, I think we had sports activity in the States. A sport activity in the state, and then 2 schools were shut down. I think Government Technical College that at Mwaniba was one of it. I think CCC, because those 2 schools were used by, was it police who did used by these people to do sport, whatever. And then because they shut down for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, no school. In a calendar that is about 12 weeks of learning, if you have 12 weeks of learning for a term, 2 is for exams. So count to you have 10. Out of the 10, 1 week should be free for relief. What you call midterm break, we call it relief. 1 week should be free for relief. So you have basically 9 weeks of learning. Then you shut out 2 for a sporting activity that doesn't concern the students. No impact at all. Just for them. What happens to our stadiums? Today we have a campaign at Uyo. Along, I don't know whoever is doing the campaign there. All of the corrections. I think the ruling party that is doing a campaign along a back road, in a school opposite St. Patrick's Catholic Church of Arinam. Where were the students? Where are the students? You've disrupted academic activities because we do not have these feelings towards our school. As far as I'm concerned, that's a serious offense. Whichever discomfort, and then a facility was designed for children ages between, let's say, 3 to 12. You are bringing in wedding ceremony, it happens in the school. And what so many other activities is fitted on that. The facility wasn't designed for that. So it is something that we, government, individuals, we haven't really sit down to say, let's have a discussion on education. And that is the genesis of all the problems we have in the educational system.
All right, if you just joined us, this is Eye on Issues, and we're talking about the Nigeria's educational system, limitations, aspirations, and a way forward. We've touched on a lot of issues, but right about now, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be engaging Idioneba more on the infrastructural decay as far as our educational system is concerned, on the poor or unavailability of adequate manpower and personnel, on the lack of talents that we do not have within the academic system, amongst other issues. Please stay with us.
Information on topical issues affecting the common Nigeria, from issues on politics, security, education, health, lifestyle, and so much more. Join Janice Coburn and Iyai Anyekin every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
Glad to welcome you back. This is Eye on Issue, coming to you live on Spectrum Television, and we are talking about Nigeria's educational system, challenges, limitations, as a way of finding lasting solutions to the problems bedeviling our educational system. It's always very disheartening to know that, I mean, at a moment where medical tourism as well as educational tourism has called millions of naira, or millions of dollars rather, from the Nigerian system, most Nigerians are still flying abroad to educate their children. And of course, back home, between the privately owned institutions and the government-owned institutions, even the government officials themselves have been accused of not sending their children to the public institutions. Reasons being that they are poorly funded, no investment, no political will, infrastructural decay, amongst other issues. These and many more are what we are talking about today on Eye on Issues, and we have Idioneba, who is a teacher and a counselor, with us on this edition of Eye on Issues. Let me come back to you. Actually, before we went to the break, we're talking about the challenges, the fact that academic facilities have a whole lot more activities happening within the confines of that environment that they were not designed to undertake, or they were not designed for, just like the campaign rallies that you've mentioned. The fact that there seemed to be an absolute lack of political will to implement issues that has to do with education. Let's talk about infrastructure. Now, during the time that we had the rainy seasons, we've had and seen pictures and videos of students, even within our Kwabum state, sitting on the floor to receive lectures or lessons. We've had children sitting under the tree to receive lessons. We've had children sitting in flooded environment, and then teachers finding a place to perch just so the rain can finish before they continue with their lessons. How would you assess the investment in this sector?
Well, talking of investment in the sector, I don't know how much was budgeted. The public is not privy to that information to know how much the government has budgeted for education and why they're not providing these things. So we just blame everybody in that respect. The government lacks concern about what is happening. And of course, that is why the private sector is booming in education. The private sector is opening up so many spaces, and even the only problem we have in the private sector is the degree of abuse that is lurking around in the private schools, some of our private schools. Infrastructurally, we haven't, just like I said, we can't record anything infrastructurally, except maybe in one or two schools there. And when we talk of educational infrastructure, the one that really comes to a street man's mind is the building. The building, if you have the building, the classroom blocks, offices for teachers, that's it. Maybe it's what There are so much to that. When we talk of educational infrastructure, we refer to the building. Architectural, refer to the architectural, that is the building, the space for play. And so designed in such a way that the student is safe within that space, can learn within that space. That's number two. Number three, sorry, number one, that's number two, we look at the intellectual infrastructure. How many instructional materials have been sent in for the teaching of that subject? One, I remember having to shout and jump in class when I didn't study education, trying to explain a simple thing like syllable to students. But after my training in education, I designed instructional materials to be used in the school in which I teach. Fine. Now, when you look at that, how many of those materials have been sent by the government to schools to be used in the teaching of subjects in those schools? The intellectual infrastructure, are they there? Then we look at under infrastructure, personnel also comes in. The amount of budget that has been sink in the training and retraining of teachers, because learning is a continuum, and then we are living in a very dynamic society.
Okay,
very fine. So it's someone that has a teacher certificate, maybe license sheets that happens, let's say 2000, will not be equipped with the modalities of 2023. We change every day. Then the provision of other things like the curriculum sent in to which schools you find them, given out this is your subject, what I call subject lab. In my research, I discovered that there is no subject that doesn't need a lab. But in our old schemes, labs are restricted to chemistry, biology, and so it is now that we've, of course, where I teach in the English lab. We need math lab, geography gardens, and the rest of them. Has the government provided those things? And you move away from there to look at content fishing. Are the teachers equipped to source for content or revalidate their content? That is, in the salary that you've budgeted for teachers. Teachers will be paid 50,000 naira, 60,000 naira in this economy. With this 50,000 and 60,000 naira respectively, that are supposed to feed, take care of their families, dress for the classroom. Classroom dressing is another thing we should talk about. Dress for the classroom, and source for research materials. Source for materials, which they're saying 50,000. Sourcing for materials that I want to teach literature today, and I'm teaching maybe Othello, William Shakespeare's Othello. A whole lot of writings and documentaries and movies have gone on overseas that work was written.
Yeah.
Do I have the materials to go? Let me check the net a day before to read new ideas, new thought in that work. Data from where? Still accumulated within this 50,000.
Let's even come. You've mentioned a very key issue now, research work. Now, let's look at from the area of training and retraining. How many teachers are computer literate to even have access to the internet to source?
That's a question. I think that question was asked in the National Assembly when a particular agency was criticized for doing CBT, computer based tests. And this senator, I have forgotten the name, but I know I have heard this. I think Senator House of Reps asked, how many of our instructional models are ICT based? None. Very few. Maybe some of the private schools. When we talk of CBT, computer based tests, instruction should have been computer-based instruction before you talk of computer-based tests. Not that you taught this child 1 + 1 = 2, and you say you've taught addition. Then when the exam comes, you say 1 over 3.5 times 2. You've lengthened that thing. It's out of the framework that you had given. So if you're talking of computer-based tests, we should have computer-based instructions. We should have computer-based models, so that they can learn along. We have so many students, of course, in the schools in which I consult for. I always advise that SS1, 2, 3, let there be computer-based instruction, at least to some level, except in some subjects that they cannot do. Because there are some students who fail JAM because they couldn't manipulate those things. God forbid, 2023. Okay? And when these things are not provided by the government, you expect to graduate a student from that system, and that student will stand shoulder to shoulder with his mate graduated in the United States of America or in London, is not going to be possible. You now graduate that type of student that is not armed with being with everything he needs, and you feel when he graduates he's not going to carry file and be walking around in the Housing Secretariat and blaming the government. How did you arm him to be self-employed in the content you had given him, in the type of content you had given him, in the techniques you had given him?
All right, let's even talk about another issue. Now, you've mentioned content, equipment, and there have been this argument going back and forth that our graduates are certificate-based. They're not result-oriented. They're not competent enough. So you find a graduate who graduates from a particular field and yet cannot do 1, 2, 3 things from that field to show proof that this is what the person actually studied. And some people have blamed and attributed this to the fact that most people just stumble on the courses they studied in their institution. And that draws a mind back to the situation of a talent that a lot of parents, by the way, agree that is missing within the primary secondary school window, where we used to have counselors sitting side by side with children and understanding the strength of those children and then guiding them to know what course they are best suited for. Another challenge is the fact that parents over time have been accustomed to imposing their field of endeavor or what they feel their child should become or their children should become on their children. And this has also been said to affect the level of competence of the graduates that have been churned out. Do you agree with these two mindsets?
Well, that's a different area. That's a different area, and it all boils down to a source in quotes. I think when Goswell was the governor of this state, one of my favorites, yeah, when Goswell was there, he gave a higher bursary to medicine and law. I stand to be corrected. But I know the bursary...
Yeah, there was a preference to the law students and the medical students.
Fine,
there was a preference.
Good. Now, my question is why? Because the society judges that course to be very classy.
Highly in demand.
Yeah, every parent would want the child to go there. Okay? Now, what we do as counselors is not to tell the child don't go there or go there. Counseling is a guidance profession. We examine the child to see his area of competency, strength, and then we want to look at what we call the ability versus aspiration. They have to agree. You want to be a broadcaster, you're a chronic stammerer that you cannot control yourself. You want to join the police force because you love the force, but you are just 3 feet tall and you know you won't be accepted. At that level, we say ability does not match aspirations. That's
I think on the issue of stammering for broadcasters, a lot of people would debate. I mean,
a lot of people would debate because there are other genres. Yes, there are other genres that I'm just setting as an example. So that one is a different influence entirely on the fine. But the graduating people that are certificate based are not result oriented. Now, the course content, for instance, someone reads mass communication, and then from year 1 to year 2, year 3, year 4, he hasn't stepped foot on a studio. And then the school puts up a studio, and the students are called up to come stand. This is how a studio looks like. A mass communication student is not taught how to operate a camera. When I wanted to do photography, I had a friend and I told him, I want to pick a postgraduate course in mass communication because I want to do photography. He looked at me and said, if you want to study photography, guy, buy a camera. Start operating it, get to the street, use YouTube. Once you go to the university, you'll be taught history of photography.
And you'll be taught how to draw the camera.
How to draw the camera and goes.
And all of those.
It now boiled down to the level of content that we give to the student. So the students graduating from there feels he needs to apply to AKBC, to Spectrum Television to be employed. And then to be employed then as what? He tries to adjust to fit into the system. Fine. But if from year 1, he's introduced to the GST courses around, use of English for communication, Nigerian people and culture, and so on, and then at the end, from year 2, all instruction becomes practical base. Once that student graduates, he thinks of setting up his own studio. He feels he has been armed to do the work. That is the only reason why someone would graduate and be certificate-based. Another reason is you going to school. This one is student-based.
The individual.
Individual-based. All the assignments that are given to you, you pay someone to do it for you. Because each assignment is exposure. You call it post-classroom exposure. That's the professional name for it. You call it assignment. The pro name is post-classroom exposure. So you've given an assignment to look at a particular subject. You get copy, you steal the thing, you pay someone to do it for you, you get your A and you move on. When once you graduate, you will be certificate based. So that it's also 100% on being exposed to the content, 100% on the individual, because you can expose the individual and the individual refuses to learn. Exposed. Okay, fine. So that's another way you can. He graduated. I had a friend who I asked him. He had a master's in engineering. I still remember we were eating soya at Plaza. I asked him. So as a master's degree holder in mechanical engineering, you can disassemble this car and fix it back. He said no. At the master's level, is just a supervisor. I was like, At the first degree level, when you were not a supervisor, how many cars did you even open? You can't bring out a tire. But he has a master's degree in mechanical engineering. Okay. So that's what we are talking about.
If you just joined us, this is Eye on Issues. It's hilarious, the things we see, the things we hear when it comes to the educational system. I mean, everybody's going for the master degrees, they're going for lots of certifications, but do we have the matching technical know-how to fit our certificate? That's the big question. And then the employers of labor would say, we have a lot of graduates, yes, but not many are competent and proficient enough to handle the different responsibilities. If you just join us, this is Eye on Issues coming to you live on Spectrum Television. We just take a short pause, and when we come back, we'll be wrapping up our conversations. Stay with us. Glad to know you're still there. This is Eye on Issues coming to you live on Spectrum Television, and we are talking about Nigeria's education system, limitations, aspirations, and solutions. And of course, all of this has always been attributed to the political will, or the absence of political will to implement. Yes, we know that there have been different programs instituted by the government as a way of ensuring that we have a better educational system, but how well implemented are these programs being done? What has been the political will? Recently, we were talking about the school feeding program, which of course has generated a lot of reactions, that monies are being disbursed to the respective states, and these monies are allegedly ending up in people's accounts at the detriment of the school children who are supposed to be given just 1 square meal a day. And when you look at this kinds of government program, you look at the implementation indices, you get to ask the critical question, are we really doing what needs to be done for the educational system? Or is it just a matter of rolling out programs without following it through? Now, coming back to you, Dion, let's look at political will vis-a-vis the educational system and investment.
Okay. If, for instance, the Nigerian government steps up and say, wake up to their responsibility. Now, the primary responsibility of government is the well-being of its citizens. When you talk of well-being, first, you should be able to exist in the society that you're not molested. Hence, security comes in. When you talk of well-being, you should be strong enough to work in your society, contribute to your economy. We talk of health. And then you should be intelligent enough to give meaningful contribution rather than distraction. We talk of education. If the government wakes up to the fact that these are the key government responsibility, security, healthcare, and education, then the government will now make policies that they are ready to follow through those policies. To first increase funding to our educational system, ensure that the appropriate facilities have been given, and then they play down on their investment in politics. Very important. Play down on political investment. Nigeria, we invest too much in politics. Too much. That the social consciousness of a Nigerian or an average Nigerian is not going to school. It's getting rich, having the money. And now when they see that education is not the key to that wealth, what you are doing in the classroom becomes very difficult. I have a case where the father brings a child to school and he looks at the father and says, did you go to school? After closing, he asks the father a very kindly question, did you go to school? The father says, no, that's what I want my son to be educated. He said, no, you don't love me. You didn't get to school and you have all this. So of what use is my going to school? So we have a social environment that 90% of the students you teach believes education is a scam. You've been hearing the slogan everywhere. School na scam. They are saying this because they have seen the graduates on the streets. They have seen PhDs on the streets. They have seen master's degrees on the streets. And then they have also seen SSCE holding very high political offices and living well off. Can't even make a sentence construction. So government assessment of itself, what value does it, government, how do you value yourself to the point of saying, okay, people without a degree should hold this position? The government is not celebrating education. It's not celebrating education. So because of that, the social consciousness towards education is very low. You have to motivate and over-motivate your students to knowing the essence of learning before you can say, okay, we want to invest any knowledge on that child. So political will, number one, government must cherish education and then put facilities in place to celebrate what
let me proceed there. We have a call. Hello, welcome to Eye on Issues. Hello. Okay, I think we lost connection there. Yes, carry on. Okay, all right. So the government has to follow up with, this is the policy we want, this is how, and then the regulations. For instance, if we say this, this is very hypothetical, that all those who, before you contest for the House of Reps position, you must have a master's degree. Just hypothetical, I'm joking here. You discover that concentration would move back again to the classroom, this time around, not for students to learn, but to buy that certificate and go become House of Reps member. Okay? So when we have I had a friend outside the country and he said to do hair in a salon in US, they need some paper certification because you're handling chemicals, some kind of training. Our own government, they don't celebrate education. By celebrate, I don't mean putting occasion, bringing it up and making it look relevant and appetizing to the eyes of the young ones. So the teacher must be armed with the ability to motivate that child to learn instead of that child naturally questing to learn. All right, just allow you just 1 minute to advise Nigerians, advise Nigerian government, advise Nigerian parents as far as education and well-being of their children is concerned.
I would go to parents because it's like, let's leave the government alone. It's like as far as education is concerned, the family carries all those burdens. They carry education, they carry family, they carry security, they carry. So talking to parents, number one, make the education of your child a priority. In the days of courtship, have a kind of budget for your family. Okay, liaise with your school system and ensure, even if you can't afford the fees, because education is very expensive. If you want to talk of education in its real form, it's very expensive. Liaise with the school authority. Ensure that you give it a priority in your family. Okay, whether you went to school or not, just because the society that is fast moving into a global village, there will come a time when discussion would only focus on those that have been educated. That's the truth. This global village thing that we are moving towards a center. Okay. And then walk up to a school that you feel is good for your child. Get to the school, see the school environment, check out for infrastructure, check out, are the teachers happy? Are they properly paid? Okay. You wouldn't want your child to be in a classroom with frustrated teachers in quotes. Okay. All right. So you look at all those ones, move to see, was this place designed for a school? All right. The security and well-being of your child, is it certified? You now move from there. Then check out facilities for learning for your child, books, uniform, things that will make that child comfortable. Get them, and then you proceed, and then you monitor your child as it goes. Comes back, you check his advancement, check the evaluations, are they done properly, even though many could be so fake, and then you follow up. That's what I'll talk about.
All right, thank you very much, Idioma, for coming on Eye on Issues today. Yes, that's how much we can take today. It's been a wonderful time talking about Nigeria's educational system, limitations, aspirations, and solutions. If a government prioritizes education and invest heavily as it should be done, then we'll have Nigerian youths beginning to take interest in it. And of course, to you as a Nigerian person, as a child or a youth, it is very important for you to understand that there's a difference between having a certificate and having the professional competence or the requisite knowledge and skills that matches your certificate. My name is Francis Zedet, and I encourage you to not just go for certificates, but also get for the skills and the knowledge that you would need to back up your certificates. It's been a wonderful time being here with you on Eyes on Issues. Until I come your way again on Friday, same time, same station, remain blessed, and God bless you. Bye-bye.